Okay, hello everybody, it's Runescapefar. How you guys doing today? Welcome to Tech Doctor with Runescapefar. I'll be answering some questions about technology. Since this will be my career and I could possibly be working at an IT help desk, this will be a perfect practice for me for answering these questions in a reasonable response. So far I only had two people who commented. Third person wasn't more of a question, but more of an explanation, so that's why I'll explain that later, but let's dive right into this. So, from Lovable Hatsumiku. On me, we asked, how do you learn you had a love for technology skills? Okay, I think she meant how did you learn you had a love for technology skills? Well, ever since I was a very little kid, my grandmother actually got me into this. She used to own a little thrift shop and a small, but it's also a small computer repair shop. She used to work on Windows Vistas. She taught me everything about viruses, Trojan horses, worms. She taught me how to install antivirus and all the tech stuff of a computer back then, a Windows Vista back then, and that just kind of got me interested. And then reading these news articles back when Yahoo Tech was cool about all this advancement in technology, and a lot of this stuff is like amazing and fascinating even more about technology. And as I tell people, we shouldn't fear technology, we should learn about it. We should love technology. Technology will save us and it will make our lives easier. So, I guess to answer your question thoroughly, my grandmother. How do you keep your laptop battery in good health? That is actually a very good question of Hatsumiku. So, to keep your battery in good health, constantly keep it charged, but remove the battery. If you are constantly having your computer on the charger, remove the battery because the power will still go through the computer. So that way you're not going to damage the battery. If you keep the battery in there while you keep it on a constant charge, it can actually overcharge the battery and damage it badly. Now, make sure your battery, if you are using your battery by standalone, meaning it's not hooked up to constant power, um, keep it away from heat. Heat will damage the battery tremendously, and cold will shorten the life. So if you're outside and it's freezing cold, make sure you have like a heater or something underneath it to keep the battery at a decent temperature to ensure that the cold will not damage or shorten the life of your battery. Now, if your battery is actually malfunctioning, certain brands like Toshiba, I know, has it, Panasonic has it. They have a app you download onto your computer, or not an app, software, that will tell you if your battery's in good health or not. Now, the signs of a bad battery, which means you should throw it away, is if you A, have the battery at 100% and unplug the power supply and it immediately shuts off. That means your battery supply has failed. It is no good anymore. You need to throw it away. Or B, if your battery starts acting frantically, or if it's constantly draining faster just from being idle. Like if you have it set to a standby mode or hibernation mode, where it will turn everything off when it goes into a sleep mode, and it still drains the battery tremendously, then there's also something wrong with your battery. You need to toss it and get a new battery. So what do viruses, trojans, and other malware actually do? Again, that's actually a very good question. So viruses, trojans, and other types of malware. So what a virus does, it goes into your computer through downloads. So you could download an infected file or an infected email. And what this will do is it can wreak havoc on your computer's primary system, such as antivirus update. It can actually disable it, or it can even disable your key features needed to keep your computer running, can essentially kill your computer. Viruses can also lead to ransomware. The worst type of virus you can get is called a rootkit virus, because it will go into the kernel of the CPU and won't be detected by any types of malware scanners. So Trojans, on the other hand, can also be viruses. They're also everything's a form of malware technically. So Trojans, just like the famous Trojan horse from Troy, disguise themselves as helpful, useful files, such as say you download an educational app. Those are very popular now, or educational software, but app too on phones. And all of a sudden you start noticing your files start changing names and things are starting to be deleted. That's a Trojan horse. It disguised itself as a safe app, but in reality, it was a very dangerous app that's now wreaking havoc on your computer. Simply, you can just do an antivirus scan and delete any recent downloads that you downloaded from the internet. Secondly, be very cautious downloading. Use trusted sites to search these websites and make sure that the software is actually recognized, it's true to its name, and that you're downloaded from the legitimate site. A lot of these third-party sites will upload a legitimate copy of it, but also include the Trojan horse beneath it. So you gotta be very careful when downloading from the internet. Same goes with phones and apps. Certain apps have had malware of Trojan horses. And spyware is also part of the Trojan horse because spyware can come with legitimate services. So, say like Avast. Even though Avast is an amazing antivirus software, we're just going to use this for example. So, let's say you download Avast, the free antivirus software, and then all of a sudden, you start noticing some weird things come up on your computer when you're searching and everything. You start noticing certain things. Spyware, what it will do is it will spy on you. It will log your keystrokes. Some of them can. It can spy on your bank accounts. It can gain access to other things. So basically, it's not good whatsoever. It monitors your every single movement. So spyware is very dangerous and does come with a lot of legitimate apps. Now, saying that, Avast does not come with spyware. I've used Avast on my phone, tablets, computers. I recently downloaded the Avast driver updater. I paid $40 for it, and I was able to update the drivers on my Panasonic CF29 because I can no longer get the drivers from the legitimate source of Panasonic.com. So it actually upgraded all of them with legitimate drivers, and the computer is running much faster and better than it originally did. And ransomware is basically somebody takes over your control of your computer and they demand either cash, money, bank account information, or bitcoins now. Bitcoin seems to be the big thing now. And they will not give you access back to your computer. Now, there are ways you can avoid this, or avoid it would definitely be install the latest virus definitions for whatever antivirus software you use. Make sure it's constantly up to date itself. And if your computer does come infected with ransomware, there are softwares you can go to, like Best Buy's Geek Squad or your local computer repair shop, and they'll have a special software stick that can remove the ransomware for you. So what's wrong with using public Wi-Fi? Okay, this, again, very good question. The problem with public Wi-Fi is anybody can use certain snooping softwares to examine the ISP information, the internet service provider. So when you're connected to a public Wi-Fi, that's provided through an internet service provider. You have no security on it. So anybody can just go in there and see what you or anybody else is browsing. And that is very dangerous because they can also install softwares sometimes, from what I was told. And they can also, through an ISP server for public Wi-Fi, gain access to your private security information, such as usernames and passwords. And I don't know how they put spyware on there, but I've heard that could do it. I can't confirm that, but somebody did tell me that you can get spyware on there through using ISP if somebody hacks in there and puts a package, I think, through it. I'm not 100% sure, but that does sound very possible in this modern day and era. So, why is it important to eject a USB? So, here we go. We have our standard 64GB Patriot Quick Drive USB. Now, anything prior to Windows 10, so Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows 95, you always had to eject your USB before you took it out to prevent file corruption. So with that, if you can still manually do it with Windows 10, although it automatically does it now. But manually doing will ensure that if you have a file that you just closed down and you want to eject this now, if you hit manual ejection, it'll prompt you saying, hey, there's still a file writing to this. You say, okay, let it sit there for a little bit and then try again. See, the file is done writing. If you were to pull it out while that file was still writing to it in the background, it can corrupt the file. That has happened to me numerous times, so It's always best practice to just hit eject button. Again, with Windows 10, it automatically ejects it now, but uh, I would always still do it manually just to be on the safe side, because it tells you that information. How can you tell if an email is a spam? So for this, we're going to use an actual live example. So first off, from my email address here, this was an email I received a while back while attending Southeast Missouri State University. And with that came these emails from a Mr. Brown Jordan O. So I actually looked this up. This guy does not actually work for, or actually he does work for SEMO, but he did not send this email out. His email got hijacked and sent out these bunch of false emails. So as you can see right here, I brought up, this is the official information that will come up whenever you send an email to the IT help desk at SEMO. That never showed up here or anywhere. And also this here, to avoid this, please click and verify your email. So your email will be shut down due to several negligence of emails regarding mailbox upgrade. So first off, that's the first thing right there, because I never sent emails regarding mailbox upgrades, ever. So the whole point of this is to trick you to think, oh, did I? I can't remember. So they say, well, to avoid this, please click here. And if you are an untrained student who doesn't know anything about phishing, you would think this is legitimate, but it's not, because IT will never send you a link to click on. So verify that. Also verify with your banks, asking if there's any information updates, such as a security breach. Will you notify me via phone call, text message, or email? Will there be any links? Because there are people who say, oh, I'm your bank, we need your debit card information to verify that it is safe and secure, or something along that line. Banks will never ask you for that. And if you ever get a phone call for them, verify who they are, hang up, and then call your bank and verify that this person works for them. If they do not, give the bank the number so they can report it to the authorities. Because phishing is illegal. It is a federal offense because it is cyber crimes. Especially money laundering. Or not money laundering, I forget what the actual term is, but basically they're trying to steal your money, which is a federal offense. So make sure anytime you get calls like that, report it to the bank. So that way they can let their customers notify that this person under this number is sending out these false calls. And also to report them to them so they can notify the FBI who handles this stuff. But this is a perfect example. So as you see, this is, again, what this should look like. None of this showed up, and it came from a user SEMO email address instead of an official email address from the IT department. So if you're in a university and you see something like this, always click right here if you use Outlook, and it will tell you exactly who it's coming from. So that way you can verify that, hey, this ain't coming from the IT help desk, but they're claiming to be. If everything else looks official, and I wish I kind of kept some of these for this, but some of the ones that looked really official, again, if you come up here, they do not have the IT information help desk logo or anything, so they didn't come from our IT department. But they were very damn convincing. So, why are cables so gosh darn expensive? Well, it depends on what kind of cables you're talking about. RJ45, Cat5, or Cat5e, Cat6 standards for Ethernet connection. So from the Ethernet port to the to your NIC card, which allows you to do internet through local area network. Those are actually very cheap. I've actually got a 45-foot one. I need a big one because where I had my TV and game system was nowhere near the outlet. So I got a big one. I did have at least 25 feet to spare. But hey, I'd rather have some to spare than have none at all. But that actually helped out tremendously. And your more expensive cables, I guess, would be, unless you're talking about phone cables, in which case they do have generic that work just as good as the main one, especially for Apple's generics. But the most expensive ones would have to be the fiber connectors and the fiber cords, because for those you need a very special port on your computer, or a very special port on the back of it, just like the NIC card, but that can handle fiber optics. And That alone is very expensive. Plus, the actual running fiber to your house or company is expensive, and then to have that specialty piece of connect cable is also expensive. But other than that, everything else usually is a cheaper price compared to fiber cables. And I hope I answered your questions with satisfactory, lovable Hatsumiku. And next comes from Lucy from Discord. So, how can you build your own computer? What is the best tech gift you can recommend this holiday season? Is it better to go high tech or low tech when buying a new system? So, 1 and 3 are very good questions. 2 is an opinion, and I'll give you my opinion. But first, let's start with 1. How can you build your own computer? Now, originally I thought this would be super easy and simple until I started taking my repair classes and realized it's more complex. So, 1 and 3 relate to each other, very, very so. So, I'll answer both of those at the same time. So, how can you build your own computer, and is it better to go high tech or low tech when buying a new system? So, if you're just going to buy a standard system, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want to do a business kit, whereas it's more for a business environment, you don't really need much. You just need enough memory to store files, to run Office or Outlook or Google Drives, whatever you're using for your word processing and chart managing. So for that, you could go low tech. And actually, it's cheaper too. So for a business kit, it's a lot cheaper. Or what we call them, thin clients. I like to call it a business kit because it's specifically made for a business to operate. Now, if your business uses special software, then you need to make sure you have enough memory to run it, or RAM to run it, and enough storage to store all the data files. And make sure it's compatible with the CPU. Now, if you're going with a high-tech computer, you're most likely doing video editing, graphic design, or gaming. Or you're running a server, in which case it's a mixture between low and high tech. But, so when you're building your own computer, let's say you want to do the high tech theme. Okay, so you're going to want at least DDR4 RAM, DDR4 RAM, which I have brought up right here. Runs from 200 to 400 megahertz per second with a bus clock of 800 to 1600 megahertz per second. So that's actually very good. The data rate transfer for MTS is 16,000 to 32 or 1,600 to 3,200 with a transfer rate of 12.8 to 25.6 gigabytes per second. So DDR4 is the best way to go for gaming. You can still do it on DDR3, which has a transfer rate of 6.4 to 17.066 gigabytes per second, but DDR4 is the best. You also want to make sure of a couple other things when doing a high tech for gaming, let's say, or video editing. You need a graphics card. Your onboard graphics card ain't gonna be enough. So you need to get a high-end graphics card with a very high refresh rate. The refresh rate refers to how fast the images actually show up, or the frames per second. So with that in mind, if you have a very low frame rate per second and a very low resolution, you can actually get eye strain and motion sickness from it. And believe me, it does happen. I've had it happen to me before. So you always want to make sure that you get the one with the fastest resolution, or the highest resolution and fastest frame rates per second, measured, I believe, in gigahertz. You also want to make sure you have a high-end CPU. i3s, which is what mine came for, it did a okay job, but it was not made for graphic design. That's more made for businesses. So if you want to do a business computer on the low tech end, go with an i3 processor. It works pretty good. So we got the graphics card down and the processor. So for gaming, you really want an i9 8th or 9th generation with as many cores as it could come with, because the newer games require more cores. Cores affect how much processing information on a single die can be used. So if you have 6 cores and the game only requires 4 cores, so you got 2 cores left over that just will sit there, but it's better to have extra than none. or not have enough, because if you have below the minimum requirements, it will cause major performance lagging. So i9, i5, 8th gen, 9th gen, or i7, 8th gen, 9th gen will do perfectly fine for building a gaming computer. Motherboard's also important because you want to make sure the motherboard matches the CPU socket when it comes to Intel, which again the i9, i8, i7s, or i7s and i5s. Uh, Basically, with those, the sockets change every time they release a new CPU. So you have the 1550 that was with my HP. My new computer has a socket for 1551, and then you got 1552 or 1152. They change their socket sizes all the time. So with that in mind, if you get a motherboard that has, you can buy any type of motherboard that supports that socket type. So that's pretty nice about it. But if you have a CPU that no longer has a supported socket type, finding a motherboard can be a lot harder. So when that comes, push comes to shove, you're going to need a new CPU, because if you can't find the right motherboard for it, it's useless. But I would try to resell it and see if you get some money back for it. Won't be much. Well, you could put it towards a new one. Now, when it comes to CPU fans, also make sure it fits the right socket in the right case. If you're using a liquid cooling case or a fan for the CPU, make sure it actually fixes the form factor of the computer. And if you're not sure about what kind of form factor you have, just Google up PC case form factors, and it'll give you a diagram of the different sizes, and you can go off of that, because that also affects your motherboard. If you have a full ATX computer, you can do everything from a full ATX motherboard all the way down to a micro motherboard, or micro ATX motherboard. If you have a micro ATX motherboard, that's all you can really put in there. Or a mid-case ATX, you could put in anything from a medium ATX motherboard down to a mini ATX motherboard. You can't put in a micro. Micros are a lot smaller than the standard case. And everything on those is integrated. So I don't care for those one bit. But now you got the motherboard picked out. Does it support DDR4? Does it support DDR3? Look in the motherboard notifications, or the manual that comes with it if you buy it. Although I wouldn't buy it without looking through all the note information at the bottom. Not notifications, note information. Amazon kind of does a good job with this, but some of the more important information, like if your CPU will actually support the generation of the motherboard. I recently purchased a motherboard that had everything I need on it. The right socket size, it supported an i5, it fit my computer case. I'm like, perfect. If you scroll all the way down the bottom, though, it said only supported 8th and 9th gen. Mine was a 5th gen i5, so it was not supported whatsoever. That kind of annoyed the hell out of me. So I was like, $200 for a new i5 CPU, that would work on this. That's $200. I didn't, so I actually got my old motherboard up and running again, thanks to my professor. But make sure you read what generation of, if you're transferring parts from one computer to another, make sure it has, 1, the same socket size, 2, supports that CPU, and supports the CPU generation. But honestly, if you're building a new computer, you want to use new parts anyway. So the only thing you want to salvage is maybe the power supply, depending on how much power you use now when it comes to upgrading computer. You should always have double the amount of power required just for extra upgrades. And my personal preference, get the ones without the mesh wiring around it. It makes your PC look a lot cleaner and nicer, and it's easier to maneuver. Also get a modular model, so that way you can get attachments for it versus everything being connected to the power supply internally. I like actually having it externally. So that all goes into factor when you're building your own computer versus a high-tech, low-tech. Now, for low-tech, you want to use for game businesses, or if you're doing retro gaming. Retro gaming, a lot of them won't even be compatible with modern-day systems, so you want to go with a lower-tech system to play them. High-tech would be for your more high-end gaming, the newer games, and also for If you're wanting to do server management, or I mean, there's a lot more to do with high tech or if you're doing AutoCAD, if you're running a video editing company or a graphic company in general, you want high tech computer systems, which again has the latest CPUs, the latest graphic processing units or GPU, and also the latest highest end motherboards with DDR4 or DDR5 or GDDR5. Now, GDDR5 is more commonly used in AutoCAD systems, so keep that in mind. So, now to finally answer number 2, what is the best tech gift you can recommend this holiday season? Whew, wow, there are so many technology gifts out there. One would be a Fitbit. If you have a friend who wants to track their exercising all the time, but they don't always carry their phone on them, because a lot of people use the speedometer on their, or the, it is a speedometer technically, but I forget the official term. Through, if you have Samsung, so it's Samsung Health, it has the little speedometer thing that tracks your movements. If you don't carry your phone on you, that's pretty much useless. But if you always wear a watch, then you can use a Fitbit. Fitbits are a perfect idea. It will also measure your heart rates and tell you if you're burning calories or not. It's pretty useful, actually. I have one and I use it all the time. Not right now, of course, because it's charging. So a Fitbit would be a good idea. A wireless charger, nothing is more horrible than having to use a wired connection. Wireless chargers are perfect, and they're actually pretty decent size. I actually think I have one with me somewhere. That's not it. Okay, I had one with me, but I don't know where I moved it to. Now, another tech idea, this one's more pricey, is this little doohickey right here. It's called a VidBox. If you have a elderly loved one or your parents who have a lot of VHS tapes of very precious memories, and you want to help them convert them to DVD, this VidBox will allow you to hook up a VCR and record whatever on that VCR tape to a disc, CD disc or DVD disc, or if you have a Blu-ray writable disc, a Blu-ray disc. So, it's very simple and easy to use, especially the software is very simple to install. And so far, the GUI, or the GUI, graphic user interface, is actually very user-friendly, very straightforward. So I would definitely recommend that. That cost me about $75. It was pricey, but well worth it. And also, if you have somebody who is really big into computers, something you could do, they are cheap, is give them an external 1TB hard drive to do backups on, or to store information, or partition it to use as an expansion hard drive to the main hard drive. Hard disk drives, they're cheap and affordable. Somebody did ask me, what do you think about the future of hard disk drives? I forgot who you were, and I'm terribly sorry. But when it comes to hard disk drives, I don't think they're ever going to phase out, because hard disk drives will be with us forever. They're cheap to make. Yes, they do have a higher fail rate than a solid state drive, but unlike a solid state drive, they're cheaper and more affordable. A 1TB hard disk drive, again, externally was $50. I think $80 for one brand of hard disk drive that was internal. A solid state drive external, that's gonna be in the hundreds of dollars. And for an internal one, I think I saw one for $258 with MM.2. So solid state drives are very expensive or pricey. They're the price of a CPU or of an i5 CPU. Now, I did talk about CPUs, but for Intel mostly, because that's what I have. But when it comes to socket forms on motherboard, if you're doing gaming also, you want to have AMD versus Intel. AMD, regardless of what motherboard you use, usually for their F-series will have the same type of socket, CPU socket, on a motherboard. So you don't have to change out socket types or really worry about that much. If it has the F-type on it, then any F-type CPU will fit onto it perfectly. And AMD is more made towards gaming, and it's more affordable than Intel. I think the equivalent to an Intel i5 8th or 9th generation was about $96 for AMD versus the $200 for Intel. So AMD is a lot cheaper. So if you could go with AMD, go with AMD. I've been using AMD for my laptops. Unknowingly, I didn't have to pay attention to that, but yeah, I have AMD on my laptops. And if you want a good motherboard to buy, brand to buy, go with Gigabyte. Gigabyte has a lot of great motherboard brands out there. A lot of the people I've seen being upgraded at SEMO, including Jefferson College, use Gigabyte motherboards, and that's what we're trained on when in class is Gigabyte motherboards. And that's currently what I have in my computer here is a Gigabyte motherboard. I guess the last thing for how you can build your own computer would be, again, back to the power supply. Make sure you have a power supply that can supply power to everything. Make sure it's compatible with the motherboard. If you buy a power supply that only has a CPU fan connector of 4 pins when you need 8 pins, and you buy a CPU or a motherboard with a CPU fan port of 6 pins, you won't be able to use it and therefore have to return and buy a new PC or power supply unit that has 8 pins. Now, if you buy an 8 pin and your motherboard only has a 4 pin, some 8 pins will actually break into 2 separate 4 pins that you can use on the power or a CPU fan power supply connector. Ugh, I just woke up, so again, sorry for the stuttering. I'm still kind of tired. I haven't eaten yet, so sorry about that. But definitely make sure that is, and again, go with the thin wires versus the mesh covering the wires. It makes it very hard to maneuver around your computer and put things in and tie down. It looks ugly and horrible and disgusting when you use them. So now if you're using a big ATX computer, it would actually be perfect for that. But if you're using what I'm using, which is a micro PC computer case, it looks god awful horrible. I actually have to use some of my spare hard disk drive slots to store the extra wires. So again, go with modular, because if not, they'd be going to the fan and ruining my fan. And on a side note with fans, look at the gigahertz or the decibels of the fan. If it's 20 to 30, that is ideal, because those are very perceptible by human ear. You won't notice them. Anything above that is very noticeable, so if you're okay with having a loud fan going around while you're playing games or watching movies or whatever, yeah, that's not going to be the best idea. So try to find a fan that is made, again, fits. If you're using Intel, fix the form factor of the motherboard and the socket size, or the form factor of the case and the socket size of the CPU. And always, always, always make sure you use thermal paste. Don't put too much on there, and when you put it on there, make sure you don't get it onto the socket, the CPU socket, or else it can ruin the computer completely. Even the tiniest dot can ruin the computer tremendously. And I actually do have a bunch of motherboards in my car that I'll be doing a video over, seeing the evolution of motherboards from really, really old to more modern. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, sorry for the stuttering. Please subscribe, leave comments, and as always, have a nice day. Live, love, and game on. Peace.